Hello everyone and welcome to our brief demonstration of the combat grid. Just want to point out that right now things are just in a very temporary state. The character is actually not linked up to movement yet or anything. We're just going to be demonstrating sort of the UI for the grid that you're going to be using for both movement and skill activation. So I'm just going to press a button here to bring up the grid, and we're going to look at just some of the basic color and pattern information that we've got here. So this sort of cyan here, this kind of teal color is where I can move to. You'll see basically that I have a little arrow that's moving me there. If you're going to just bring up the grid for your character, you're actually not going to see these things off to the side. Right now what we're looking at is actually an ability that's about to be activated. So normally you just have this movement grid here. I can tell where I can move to, but since I had an ability activated right now, it would be the equivalent of clicking on one of your cards. The card would move up to the right out of the way. Here we're actually looking at a very simple ability, which is just basically like a slash. It's a melee ability with one range. So you can tell I can move here, and I can actually activate here. So, you know, your targets are going to be highlighted. If they're props, they're blue. If they're enemies, they're red. They'll also have this sort of diamond above their head. But let's take a look at the actual grid itself. It has a little bit of information. So in case, you know, we try to vary the brightness, but in case you have any problems with color blindness or anything like that, we do have an extra border on tiles that you can move to, whereas range tiles just have this sort of dashed border. If you have these sort of arrows on the corners, as you can see here, that means that this tile has valid activation, whereas a tile like this one here does not have a valid activation, does not have the little arrows on the corners. This is a subtle effect, but it just to tell you that if I tried to activate here, nothing's going to happen. I just swing at air. The game will actually prevent you from doing things like this. It's also going to help you out in a lot of other ways. For instance, here we're just doing a very basic activation where we're going to walk right up to this knoll. We're going to slash him right in the face, and that's all that's going to happen. However, if we had some sort of flanking ability, or if we had a backstab, then the actual grid system will try to place you in the correct tile so that you can hit that knoll from that tile. In this case, for instance, let's say that we're going to attack this column here. I don't know why we would, but let's say that you were angry at columns. You can actually activate in 3 different ways. Because we only have 1 range, you can't do diagonals. Diagonals are weighted as 2 range in this game, at least currently. But we can activate from the cardinal locations here. And once I click and select it as my target, I can just double click and it will basically activate in what the system thinks is the most coherent way, the most intelligent way. But we didn't want to make things a little, you know, too simple or too automated. We want to give you this control to be able to say, no, I want to attack from this side, because nothing is more frustrating than you're playing a tactical game and you end up having your character move to the place where that he's going to get backstabbed next or set up for an area of effect attack. So here you have full control. So once again, I'm just backing out here, taking the grid off, turn the grid back on, and here I'm able to attack. For instance, this werewolf, I would just move here and attack. So now we're going to have an area of effect ability, which is just going to be a line of 5. So I'm going to bring up the grid here, and you can actually see over here that there are 5 squares that I can activate on. So basically, if you can't activate on all of them, of course, it's just going to activate on the ones that you can activate on. The interesting thing here is that I can actually go diagonal. Now, as you heard before, the diagonal is 2 on range, so we do actually value it differently, which means that your skill will actually take a sort of penalty in power in order to get more range, but you will be able to activate on diagonals regardless of whether you have a cone or a line. Now this particular line that I'm using here also has the ability to ignore line of sight, which means here I'm hitting this bunk bed, and I'm also hitting that knoll behind there. Or if I activate here, I'm actually able to hit both that werewolf and the shaman back there. So here I'm looking at the targeting ring, and it tells me I have multiple angles that I can use in order to activate that will still hit something. Now in this case it's just going to hit a box, so not too useful, but over here I can hit this null, and of course if I activate from this angle here I can actually hit 2 enemies, whereas activating from here I'll only hit the 1 null. So in this example we're going to have an ability that's similar to a grenade. Bring up the grid, and as you can see I have an area of effect that is basically just a 3x3 square. The trick here is that this is actually going to not just have line of sight on the actual place that I can activate the ability, but it's also going to have line of sight of the area of effect, or on the area of effect. So what happens is, if I actually activate it on this null here, for instance, you can see it's actually not going to hit anything else. It's just kind of like if this null sort of dove on the grenade. However, I can activate it here in between the 3 targets, and I can actually hit all 3 of these targets as well as these 2 props back here that are highlighted. Now, I only have one place that I can activate from, as you can tell here, because right now we have this ability at a locked range of 3. So you'll be able to set your ranges to have basically a range of ranges, whether you can go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tiles away on activation, or if you're going to have to actually activate from 3 tiles away. So if I had something like this, again, it's just 3 tiles away, 1, 2, 3. I can look for places, for instance, this one I can activate from 3 different tiles. So here I'm 3 tiles away on each of these activation places. So this is where I can activate from to actually hit this prop here, and I wouldn't want to do that. But that's basically how that system works. And of course, for your area of effects that are lines, you're not going to want to do this, but for grenades and things like this, it's not so bad. Just one last thing to note, if you can see these lines headed out from the point of origin, those lines actually indicate that this area of effect does obey line of sight.